This has been a long time coming. Hey everyone, what up? Matt Kaiser here, and welcome to my long-awaited review. Man, I'm so late on this. On what is my most anticipated game of this year. It's also the game that got me interested in the Tales series in the first place, as well as it's what I've covered a lot on this channel, from a recap of it in 2020, news and updates of it before release, and impressions of its demo. And that is Tales of Arise. Tales of Arise is the latest mainline entry in the Tales series, and it served to celebrate its 25th anniversary, with it being made by Bandai Namco Studios and directed by Hirokazu Kagawa, I hope I'm saying that right, and produced by Yusuke Tomizawa, with the goal to bring new life to the series, while also staying respectful to the roots of past Tales games. This game was released on September 9th, 2021 in Japan, and worldwide on September 10th, 2021. It's available on the PlayStation 5, PlayStation 4, Xbox Series, Xbox One, and PC via Steam, making it the first Tales game to be on the newest of platforms, essentially a cross-gen title akin to what Zestiria and Berseria were on the PlayStation 3 to PlayStation 4 and PC. For this review, like all the other games I cover on this channel, we'll be looking at the PC version, though note I have played it also on the PS5 and I've got the Platinum Trophy. So the story takes place on the world of Dana, a medieval and natural world that has been filled with life-flowing and precious astral energy, with its people living in peace. However, all of that has changed as 300 years ago, the people of Rena, a more advanced and technical world, attacked Dana, conquering the planet and having enslaved the inhabitants, while harnessing that energy for their own means. We follow the tale with Alphen, a Danan slave who not only can't feel pain, but has also suffered amnesia, till he then meets Shion Imeris, a Renan girl who has been inflicted with a curse of thorns, where people can be harmed should they even just touch her, and has her own agenda of rebelling and taking down her own people. The two join forces, and while meeting new allies on the way, fight back against the Renans to free Dana from slavery, while also strive to create a better future for both races. Like a lot of Tales games, most of the story does start out simple, but slowly progresses to be more than meets the eye. And this game is no exception. It starts off slow, but picks up the pace very well afterwards, filled with lots of interesting scenarios and questions, as well as having many twists and turns, with a lot of them being paid off at the end. The first half is truly wonderful, and while the second half may not be as strong, it is still picked up very well thanks to the character development and the overall ending. The journey alone made it very emotional for me, and by the time I completed it, I was left satisfied. Though what made me enjoy the story a lot was the characters. It's no secret on how much I love a lot of the characters from the Tales series, and here in Arise, it's no exception, as each of them are filled with their own personality, arc, motives, and spend time together as a group, on top of also being very likable. Alphen is a wonderful protagonist who had a rough life due to having amnesia and being able to not feel pain, and also was treated as a slave. He starts off a bit edgy, but later becomes more kind and noble, while also headstrong. He truly cares for his friends and strives to make a better future for both races. And he's a bad cook.
Put some of this here.
However, my favorite character was hands down Xion. Not only is she just beautiful, like oh my god, she's just, oh, I love you Xion, but she easily, hands down, has the best development in the entire game. She starts off as sassy, optimistic, and rough towards the others, mainly due to a curse, but later she fully develops and becomes more nicer and more likable to everyone. And both Alphen and Xion's relationship throughout the whole journey together was just incredibly well done. Alphen x Xion is my favorite tail ship. The other characters like Rimwell, Law, Doralim and Kisara were also great as well, each of them providing their own motives of joining the team, while also having moments to truly shine. This cast is one of my favorites in the entire Tales series. It's just right up there with Vesperia's, Berserier's, and the Zelia duology, all thanks largely to the wonderful voice work for each of them, especially Ray Chase as Alphen and Erika Lindbeck as Xion. The side characters were also pretty neat, and while the villains in Arise weren't the most fleshed out, a couple of them stood out, not only as menacing threats, but are also driving some of the party members to grow even. Characters like Volron and Almadria were standouts in my book. While it's not my favorite story in the Tales series, I did find Arise's one to be still memorable and overall just pretty good. We get on to the visuals, and oh man, is this game gorgeous as ever. While past Tales games may have not exceeded well in the graphics department, they at least made up for it with an art style for each mainline game, so none of which would look absolutely the same, especially Vesperia, as I think its art style has aged well. Though the standout look kinda slowly declined with the Zelia duology to Zestiria and Berseria, not only because those games were connected to one another, but also because all four used the exact same engine, and while some character designs stood out, other things like previous assets were reused, and some just had a few little tweaks. And more importantly, that engine was old, so obviously for Arise, they needed a new game engine to utilize, and such they used for Unreal Engine 4, which, call me a broken record if you will, I stated in the past it's a fantastic engine, and we got some truly wonderful JRPGs, like Kingdom Hearts 3, Final Fantasy VII Remake, Dragon Quest XI, Shin Megami Tensei 5, and Scar Nexus, just to name a few, as all of them looked really great on it. Not only that, but they also created a very unique art style and shader for Arise, dubbed the Atmospheric Shader, with the devs stating that the game looks like one watercolor painting. And I believe them. This is by far the best looking JRPG I've seen in a decade, with lots of environments looking well detailed, on top of areas and cities looking great at both day and night. Oh, by the way, this game has a day and night cycle. Yes! Which is a first for the series. The character designs are really good as well, done by the wonderful Minoru Iwamoto. Did I butcher that? I hope I didn't butcher that. He has done some Tales characters in the past, and for Arise, all of them look great, as they all look very different, but they still have that Tales vibe and don't look completely generic. Especially my girl Xion, Doralim and Kisara, which, the latter two, made the internet go thirsty for them before release, and I can't really blame them. Like all Tales games, they also sport an anime opening and lots of cutscenes, with Arise being done by Ufotable, and they look pretty nice. On my first playthrough, I ran on this in the PS5 with performance mode on, which ran at a very consistent 60 FPS. For the PC version of this review, it was the same settings I ran for Scarlet Nexus, 1980 by 1080p, and it was aiming to run at 60 FPS, which I mainly got for the cutscenes in Calaglia. But certain areas like Sicilidia was a bit too intense, with the frame rate dropping at the 30s. But the main issue, regardless of both versions I played, was the draw distance. This is just bad, as this leads to textures, enemies and NPCs just popping in. In nighttime it's not as bad, but daytime it's distracting and it sticks out a bit like the sore thumb. Though, with those complaints aside, this game overall just looks great and is by far the best looking game in the entire Tales franchise. Now onto the gameplay. So the Tales series is known for its linear motion battle system, LMBS for short, featuring real-time action combat, brimmed with player synergy with the party members, skill, and also performing cool combos, thus making it a staple over the years, with each game having a different iteration of it, filled with new mechanics. For Arise, it takes a slightly different approach to the battle system, adding some new dynamic features into the mix. For starters, you're allowed to run more freely than before, while also having a jump button. Furthermore, normal attacks make a return, as past Tales games like Berseria and Zestiria had only attacks tied to arts via an art tree. With Arise, arts are tied only to a gauge called AG, which are like the souls from Berseria, and are consumed on how much you use them, and can be filled over time. But unlike Berseria, the amount of AG does increase throughout the course of your playthrough via skills, with the max being 10, double more than Berseria's. Arise has two panels set for arts, one for ground, one for aerial. It starts for having only 3 for each, but as you progress, that limit is unlocked to 6, so potentially you can have a maximum of 12 arts at your disposal, tying well with both ground and aerial combat. Another thing Arise brings is dodging. Past Tales games like Graces, Zestiria and Berseria did have a form of dodge like the quick step, but here in Arise it's a full-on dodge, and just like Scarlet Nexus per se, there is also a perfect dodge, where if you time your dodge just well, it gives you a slowdown wide aura, while also some iframes, but more importantly, it gives you an opportunity to perfectly counterattack enemies. Arise also introduces character perks, special abilities attributed to each character after they perform a certain action. Alfin's been able to activate an art using his flame sword at the cost of his own HP after using a previous art. Shion's been able to detonate bombs from her normal arts with now a much bigger blast radius. Women are able to save one of her casting arts, and then when she casts the same art she saved previously, it transforms into a more powerful art. Law being able to deal more damage and combo harder after taking no damage. Dolim able to extend his rod longer after doing a perfect dodge, which increases his hitbox output. Gisara being able to increase his stamina and use arts while guarding after she does a perfect guard. It is worth mentioning that she is the only one that can guard in this game and not dodge. Arise also brings boost attacks. Now these are similar to Berseria's Soul Break, where each character will perform a special devastating action to knock down and stagger enemies with the prompt Boost Break. With Arise, you have the option to use any of them once they are full from any character for any means you want, and best thing is that you don't even have to play those specific characters, and each of them have their own uses. Alphen using the Blazing Sword to mow down enemies at the cost of HP, Shion's being able to fire a blast that can take down aerial enemies, Wimwell's been able to stop enemies from casting arts and even stealing them in the process, Law's been able to shatter enemies that have armor or shields, Doling's been able to trap enemies that can evade your attacks, and Kisara able to stop an enemy from charging you with her big, gigantic, shield-like wall. There is also the Boost Strike. These are essentially similar to the linked arts from Tales of Exilia and the Fail Strikes from Tales of Vesperia, if you combine them both into a blender. If you or another party member does enough attacks to fill that strike gauge on the enemy, you can perform a special team-like Mystic Art finisher that can insta-kill them, similar to say the Brain Crush from Scarlet Nexus. And with 6 party members, there are a whole lot of different ones to pull from. While in the case for bosses, they can be dealt once you reach their HP to half, only just damaging them, and eventually once you reach to just 1 HP. Speaking of Mystic Art, Over Limit makes a return. If you perform a number of perfect dodges or just take a significant amount of damage, or just a lot of damage to put in layman's terms, a blue aura glows and you turn into Over Limit, where you're able to use as many amount of arts without no cost for a limited time, while also performing a Mystic Art. While this is nice and all, the only complaint I have is that I wish there was a gauge beforehand to see on how many dodges or damage I could take to activate it personally. But then we get to playstyles, as each playstyle are all varied, and I have to say, all characters were fun to play, with Alphen being the fast sword wielder, Shion the long range shooter, as well as a healer, Wimwell the excellent mage, Law the brawler, Doling the staff wielder and caster, and Kisara the tanky shield queen, lady, you get the gist. The bosses in this game can be tough on occasion, and some of them are quite hard hitting to deal. Unlike normal enemies, these bosses can't be regularly hit stunned or comboed easily, though luckily you can stagger them if you hit their weak points, and some of them do have cores to break to knock them over for a bit, or can be even weak to certain boost attacks. It's clear that they want you to utilize the dodging system and boost attacks well, and while I did find some annoying, there were some bosses I just found memorable and fun, like Volron and the cameo bosses. There can be still a bit of improvement with this boss design, but for what they did, I don't mind it. Tales of Arise has a skill panel for each character, similar to Grace's and Zillia's, filled with titles, abilities and arts to use, and you earn SP from finishing battles, but more importantly, completing side quests. And the more you progress through the game, whether from the story, side quests, or doing certain actions, you unlock a title for each character. Another addition for Arise is Cure Points, CP for short. This is used for a lot of things and can be spent for refilling your party's HP, taking down obstacles especially in dungeons, and healing your own party from healing arts. It can also save you from losing a fight, minus story bosses, if you have enough, that is. The way to restore it is using certain items, camping, or even just finding certain healing lights placed before you when there's a boss up ahead. This is a mechanic I do find okay at best, though it can be a bit stressful sometimes, especially when you run out of items to restore it and have no form of healing. Not helped with the fact that items in this game are really expensive, and you can gain gold only from side quests, finding them in random areas or selling materials and items. This is handful for sure, and which I do hope that the next game removes this CP for sure. In terms of scope, Tales of Arise is sublinear, a sort of balance between linear with some open exploration akin to Dragon Quest XI. While I don't find it as big as that, and some bits do really get narrow, I think the overall exploration is just very good. Finding every corner for items and owls, more on that later, and you just get some truly breathtaking views. I definitely feel like I'm more rewarded with finding some areas that weren't visible to the naked eye. Like recent Tales games, you can also even fast travel. Now, the dungeons in this are solid, for the most part. While they don't have anything puzzle related, most of them are interesting, and this is where the CP comes in serving as obstacles. Some Tales games had some lackluster ones. However, I'll say that this game does improve the dungeon design, as some recent ones from past just had some really bad ones. But I hope it's an improvement for the next game, as there's a lot to really improve. As well as furthermore, you are able to also jump and sprint freely. And not only that, but you can also even swim, which is a first for the series, traversing through areas that don't have any restrictions to yourself. Tales of Arise also brings crafting and weapon equipment, as well as synthesizing accessories into the mix. Whether you find a nearby crafter, synthesizer, or even a merchant, you'll be able to craft weapons to become more stronger with the right materials, as well as transfer skills from other accessories and upgrade them, giving them solid stats for your characters. During your venture, you also see a camping spot, which not only lets you see the party interact through skits, but also can be used to view skits you triggered in past, as well as watch the ufotable anime cutscenes. You can also do cooking, with each recipe suited to a certain character to cook, and they give you a bonus, like faster XP rate, heal after battle, or rare item drops, and once you rest, your CP is restored to full. Side quests are also here, and they're pretty solid. Some of them gave me a laugh even, and they've just felt very rewarding, as they not only give you a lot of gold, but also SP to spend on the skill panel, which makes them very worth it. Overall, Tales of Arise has a pretty amazing combat system. I definitely find it as one of my top favorites, alongside Destiny Director's Cut and the Xillia duology, and exploration, for the most part, was really good. The soundtrack for Tales of Arise is pretty good, composed by main series composer Motoi Sakuraba. He brings a lot of orchestral and guitar motifs into the music, setting a wonderful atmosphere with some banger battle music, and I argue it's one of his better works since the Xillia duology. While not my favorite soundtrack in the series for sure, it's still a pretty good one. Give them a listen. Oh boy, this topic. Now, Tales of Arise aimed to change some things past Tales games had, to make it more fresher and not be, as the critics say in the past, too samey. And there's a lot I will mention. Back to the combat. Tales of Arise removes guarding, which in past Tales games were used to reduce damage, for 5 of the 6 party members, with them dodging instead, with Kaiser being the only exception to guard. Previous Tales games also had victory screens, where once you complete a fight, you'll be treated a victory screen with the party either saying a line of dialogue or funny interaction with the team. With Arise they omitted that and have you return back to the field map, though they still keep the dialogue in there. When the Mystic Art activates, Tales usually inserts a 2D anime cut-in. With Arise they remove that and have a slight substitute with an anime-like blur to make them more immersive and streamlined. Killing enemies do not provide you with gold or grade. The portraits of characters during battles are in the boost meter and not aligned with the HP, as well as being less illustrated. Another one is that because you're able to switch characters more easily during combat, Arise does not have co-op multiplayer. But the biggest change, and probably the most controversial one out of them all, is the skits. Lots of Tales games have skits, which are optional conversations that diverge from character development to also funny conversations, and they had different formats from each era of Tales, from boxes to a manga style, and all of which were 2D illustrated. For Arise, they changed it into a more comic book style with 3D models. Now these are somewhat similar to Scar Nexus's comic panels, which were used for majority of cutscenes in that game. However, Arise takes it a step further for allowing to have more body movement and expressions. Though like Scar Nexus, cosmetics are applied here, and the thought of characters wearing a costume during a skit is such a cool idea. It's very clear that some really hate them, but I am not one of them, and I just think it's a solid way of evolving the skits. They probably need some work on improvement in later games, but for what they are, I still like them, and to be honest, I care mostly on what the skits provide, like character development or funny interactions, with this game doing very well on just that.
Ow! I take it back! I love owls! Owls are the best! I swear!
There are also some couple of changes, but I just want to get the more noteworthy ones out. Now we get to content. Tales of Arise does have a solid amount of things to do, whether it's doing or beating the main story. First off, it's collecting owls. When you explore through Dana, Hutu, your mascot, will jump and disappear to find nearby owls, and when you approach an area where an owl is nearby, Hutu will re-emerge, showing you the owl is hidden, and you'll hear a noise from the owl to find where it's hiding. Once you find the owl, they'll reward you with a cosmetic, and once you collect a bunch of them, you can go to the Owl Forest, where the Owl King will reward you with items and costumes. Also, side note, Shion and Alphen interpreting the Owl Queen and King is just so cute. Oh my god, I love it. Another is farming, where you can send a bunch of animals to the Elder Mancian Ranch, feeding them, and over time they can grow and sport out ingredients useful for cooking. Another one is fishing, where when you find a lake, Kisara can wield out her rod and lure to capture some fish, which result in a QTE minigame that you have to press correctly at the same time while also keeping your rod out of the red zone. And if you keep exploring more, capturing some fish and doing some side quests, you'll find better rods and lures to catch the harder fish, and they can be used to sell or even make food. There are also artifacts in this game, which gives you the grade and stats you can use to get New Game Plus. There is also a Coliseum at Elderman and Sia, where you can even do solo or group fights without using items for rewards, as well as, finally, training to perform some cool combos that the series is well known for. And recently, they had some updates, including new enemies to fight, and DLC, including fighting Kirito and Asuna from Sword Art Online. Yes, I am not making that up, that actually is a thing, that actually happens. Monsters like Gigants as well return in this game, and they are scattered out throughout the entire game, being optional tough bosses, including 4 really hard boss rushes to take down. There is also a super boss rush, which lets you fight against some of the main villains again, but they're more harder, and they also have a secret boss in the mix. However, the main standout to me is the X cameo dungeon, which is a wonderful secret that veteran Tales fans would love, filled with so many references to a lot of past entries, and the cameo bosses they have in this are just incredible, and some of my favorite bosses in the game. It's a perfect way of handling a cameo boss, which I hope future games explore this idea more. As such, it took me 65 hours overall to get the Platinum Trophy for PS5, and I'm currently reliving that for the PC version. There's just a lot of things to do in Arise, which overall may be satisfied. This concludes my review for Tales of Arise, and I must say, it exceeded my expectations with flying colors. Everything from the characters, the story, the visuals, the combat, the music, the exploration, and the amount of love and effort being put into this game is just phenomenal. While not perfect, of course, and it does have some flaws, it's still a remarkable game, let alone a remarkable JRPG and a remarkable Tales game. The main theme for Tales of Arise was inheritance and revolution, and I'm happy to report Arise succeeded those themes spectacularly well, with it staying true and respecting on what the Tales series was known for, but also evolving it so the series can be more up-to-date, fresh, and break free from the niche wall that held it back, leading the series to a pretty strong future. Overall, Tales of Arise is a phenomenal game and has earned my spot as my favorite Tales game, so I'll give it a 4.5 Hootus out of 5. So, what do you think about Tales of Arise? Let me know down in the comments below. Anyway guys, thanks for watching, so punch that like button, drop down a comment, and kick that subscribe button if you're new. I'll see you guys in the next video. Mad Kaiser, out.